Picture a sheer wall of volcanic rock, andesite, rising 335 meters straight up out of the plains of ancient Anatolia. It's an incredibly steep, harsh mesa, and functionally, an impenetrable natural fortress. Today, this mesa is scattered with the sprawling marble ruins of the Pergamon Acropolis. But back in the 3rd century BC, this exact spot was ground zero for a highly calculated, aggressive public relations campaign. In the power vacuum following Alexander the Great, mega empires like the Ptolemies in Egypt leveraged their divine pedigrees to maintain control. Power required a mandate of mythic prestige that had been centuries in the making. Then you had the Attalids. They seized control of Pergamon in 281 BC. They had a massively defensible location, an overflowing treasury, but lacked any historical prestige. No famous ancestors, no divine connections, and no ancient mandate to rule. Faced with these established giants, the Attalids realized that physical security was insufficient. They needed to manufacture a cultural identity grand enough to rival Athens itself. If you don't have a divine bloodline, you invent one. The Attalids boldly wrote themselves directly into Homeric myth, claiming they were the direct descendants of Telephus, the son of the legendary hero Heracles. They then etched this newly adopted heritage into physical reality by constructing the massive Pergamon Altar, literally placing their fabricated ancestors right alongside the gods in marble. Look closely at the altar's exterior frieze. It depicts the Gigantomachy, the mythical battle between the Olympian gods and the giants. This was a highly deliberate piece of propaganda, designed to equate the Attalids' recent, localized military victories over neighboring tribes with a cosmic triumph of order over chaos. By forcing the Greek world to look at their military records through the lens of divine mythology, this architectural flex successfully anchored their manufactured lineage into accepted history. But architectural monuments only get you halfway there. True Greek legitimacy required intellectual supremacy. So the Attalids opened a new front on the cultural battlefield by constructing the colossal Library of Pergamon, explicitly designed to rival the famous Library of Alexandria. Housing at least 200,000 scrolls, the library was less about public education and more an aggressive display of wealth and cultural hoarding. They wanted every scrap of known philosophy, science, and literature physically held within their walls. This massive accumulation actually triggered an international trade dispute. The Ptolemies in Egypt cut off Pergamon's supply of papyrus with an embargo. While it's a myth that Pergamon invented parchment in response, they did have to aggressively popularize the use of stretched animal skins, a material that eventually became known as pergamenos, or parchment, just to keep their library growing. The library proved that the Attalids viewed knowledge as a weapon. They essentially bought their way into the center of Greek intellectual life. To fully prove their greatness, the Attalids also had to conquer their own geography. They started by carving a massive 10,000-seat theater directly into the side of their steep cliff. At 36 meters high, it remains one of the steepest ancient theaters in the world. But that steep elevation created an incredibly complex engineering problem. How do you supply millions of liters of daily water to a high-altitude citadel supporting a booming population? The solution was the Madrada aqueduct system. Instead of building a traditional, flat-sloped Roman-style bridge, engineers routed water from a mountain spring 40 kilometers away. The water traveled down the mountain, dropped into a 200-meter deep valley, and entered a sealed, pressurized lead pipe. This created a communicating vessel system. Physics dictates that fluid in an enclosed pipe will seek its own level. The immense downward pressure in the valley forced the water to shoot back up the massive 335-meter cliff entirely on its own, depositing fresh water right into the Acropolis. Conquering that cliff face with unmatched hydraulic engineering sent a clear message to the rest of the Hellenistic world. Pergamon possessed an elite, unparalleled technical genius. By the 2nd century BC, the geopolitical landscape was shifting rapidly. The Roman Republic was expanding eastward, systematically dominating the Mediterranean basin and crushing any kingdom that resisted. Anticipating the inevitable Roman victory, the final Attalid king changed the course of his city's history. When Attalus III died in 133 BC, his will contained a staggering directive. He literally bequeathed his entire kingdom directly to the Roman Republic. This complete capitulation yielded a massive payoff. Instead of being besieged, conquered, and burned to the ground, a free Pergamum absorbed a huge influx of Roman investment, leading to the construction of grand new structures like the Temple of Trajan. The Attalids recognized that surrendering their political sovereignty was the only viable way to guarantee their city's physical survival and cultural immortality under the new Roman reality. That gamble paid off entirely. By the 2nd century AD, Roman Pergamum had peaked as a thriving metropolis of 200,000 people. It even became a world-renowned medical hub, with patients flocking to the Asclepion, a massive sanctuary dedicated to the god of healing. The city's cultural footprint remained deeply imposing for centuries. It was cited as one of the 7 churches of Asia in the New Testament book of Revelation, where early Christians were so intimidated by the massive scale of the Pergamon Altar that they referred to it as Satan's throne. Look back at the starting point of the Attalids, a minor, unproven dynasty clinging to a barren, sheer rock face, with no ancestral claim to power. Within a few generations, they left behind a sprawling, legendary metropolis that rivaled the greatest capitals of antiquity. The city remains a case study in how a legendary reputation is constructed from the ground up. With enough ambition and engineering, a legacy can be willed into existence.